Well, welcome everybody to Tosot time, and we have a very, very special guest with us today. And I just want to run through just some of the items on his resume because if I went through the entire resume, it'd probably take longer than the interview itself. He's so accomplished. But 16th season as a co-host on Motor Trend's MECUM Auto Auction. Also serves as a producer and talent for programming on MAV TV, Fox, NBC, some past television work, people. Listen to this. The Indy 500. Come on. The Paris Dakar Rally. Again, come on. ARCA Truck Series, which is cool. He is also one of the most versatile race car drivers on the planet, from ARCA ovals to SCCA road courses, endurance racing, Rolex GT sports cars. I mean, that's covering a lot of ground there. Former track holder for the Midvale Speedway, current track holder, record track holder for Gingerman Raceway. 25 people career wins. 112 career top 5 finishes, Mitsubishi factory test driver, 2004 GT Challenge Series champion, and as an author, he has authored 4 books: Corvette Miracle, Porsche Legend, Shelby Legend, and 68 Shelby Turnbine IndyCar. And this is all the resume of, I am pleased to say, my friend, Mr. Stephen Cox. Stephen, please say hello to everybody.
It's so good to hear your voice, Jerry. Hello to everybody. It's great to be a part of Tosot time.
Well, thank you, Stephen. It's an absolute treat to have you be a guest on the show. Hey, look, I think most of us gearheads know you from your gig on the MECUM auctions, and I've just read through just a small portion of your resume as a race car driver. But I want to dig a little bit deeper than that. I want to start a little bit further back. Stephen, if you would, tell us, first of all, what got you into the media end of things, and also what got you behind the wheel of a race car, please.
Well, I was a racing driver long before I ever went on television. And yeah, I mean, that's really where my heart's at, is what I've always loved. And but to answer your question in the proper order, I went to college for broadcasting.
Okay.
And I had been an athlete all the way through high school, all during my youth. I played everything: basketball, baseball, football. I mean, for crying out loud, I was 3-time table tennis champion. I played everything there was to play.
Wow.
And I got out of school and I thought, well, how am I going to parlay this into a living? I'm 6 feet tall, so the NBA is out. And I just, I had grown up going to racetracks with my father. And I didn't realize that by the time you're making that decision in your late teens and early 20s, that the boat's done sailed, that, it's very, very difficult to get into the sport at that point in time. But
Sure.
it's what I wanted to do. And so I started driving race cars, and we can talk about that in a minute. But at the same time, I was going to college for broadcasting. And I got out and I went into radio. Then I went in, spent some time in radio news, and I even got picked up by ABC in Indianapolis to be one of their morning news personalities for a couple of years. And I got to where I really didn't enjoy it, and I saw how disingenuous and inauthentic the news was. And I thought, everything I'm doing has been about cars my whole life. That's what I want to go back to. I'm not really going to pursue this career path very much farther. And so I got hired by a dear friend of mine named Terry Langner that I've known for many years, and he was one of the initial programmers for ESPN2 back in the day. And he brought me on board to announce a go-karting show that they wanted to do live on Saturday nights. And this goes back to the 1990s. And so that was my first gig, so to speak, in live television broadcasting. And Terry brought me on board because I was a driver and I had gone through go-karts earlier in my racing career. And so he said, we should get this guy on board. And so from there, I started picking up more work with ESPN2, a lot of off-roading work out west. And then Speed Vision came along, and I got a
Yeah, I
lot of work
remember.
with them. Then you'll remember Speed Vision morphed into Speed.
Sure.
And I got a lot of work on speed, and I was working all over the country and driving at the same time. And that's kind of how it all happened. And then the funny thing is, the same friend who gave me my first ever gig called me up in 2008, and he said, "Stephen, I know you love cars. You're a driver. You're a muscle car guy. You're a sports car guy. Would you think about doing an auction?" I had just lost a big production contract for a desert racing series out west that we had for a number of years, and just natural changes occur. And so I thought, I think I can do that. I think I can work that in. And here I am 16 years later, still doing the same thing. So there's I don't know how compressed that was. That's like the 3-minute version of the last 20 years.
No, that's good. And again, us gearheads, we perceive your gig with MECUM as a dream gig. I would think.
Oh, yeah.
I don't tell me any different if it isn't. I think it's got to be the dream gig. Yeah,
It really is. I've had a great deal of fun doing it, and I try to remember every time I arrive in another city after this big, long, bloody plane flight, and getting scanned and groped by TSA, and you arrive and you're exhausted and you're miserable, and you're thinking, "Man, this travel's really rough." And you get up the next morning and think, "How bad can it be?" There's people out there digging ditches, man. I am going to be grateful every day.
Stephen, we're kindred spirits that way. I think I travel about 36 weeks out of the year.
That's right.
And
You travel
and
more than me, I think.
I always tell people that there's nothing glamorous about air travel anymore, right? But what makes it all better, just as you said, is when I'm with the group the next day and having that personal one-on-one experience. That's what it's all about. It makes the travel all worth it. But yeah,
It does.
yeah. So, Stephen, Sopwith Motorsports, your team, your television production company, if you remember, it's almost exactly a year ago to the day where you and I first met, and how our conversation started was me inquiring the origin of the name Sopwith. To me, it's this iconic name on many, many different levels. I know it from aviation, but please share with our audience what you told me a year ago about the name and the origin.
Well, I have always been passionate, a passionate enthusiast, not, a full-time academic or anything like that. But I've written a lot on World War I aviation. I've gone to France, I think 9 times. I've kind of lost count. And a lot of those trips were with a shovel in one hand and a metal detector in the other, conducting battlefield archaeology.
Wow.
And so really some deep research. And I really just passionately enjoy the study and reading about aviation in the First World War. And of course, Sopwith on Thames was one of the major aircraft manufacturers for the British Air Force, which at the time was known as the Royal Flying Corps. They built the legendary Sopwith Camel, and if you don't know it from World War I, everybody knows that Snoopy flew a Sopwith Camel, right? And so, yeah, and so when it came time to name my race team, everybody uses their last name followed by racing. And I thought, okay, I don't want either that or Joe or Smith Brothers Racing or something like that. And I decided early on that I didn't want my name and I didn't want the term racing. And so I named it Sopwith Motorsports after the Sopwith on Thames Aviation Company, which before the outbreak of the war in the summer of 1914, Sopwith had actually been a very successful international aviation racing team. They raced airplanes all over Europe and succeeded wildly. And so I thought, let's revive the name and put it back into racing of some type, in this case on 4 wheels. And since then, the company has grown. We've had the name for a number, and we are grateful to own and use the name Sopwith in the United States.
Oh, so cool. Yeah, and an iconic name on so many different levels. Really, really cool that you did that. Well, Stephen, again, your gig at MECUM, I've watched it over the years expand. And of course, MECUM now, their auctions coast to coast, not only cars, but motorcycles, tractors, even. I'm just wondering, how busy does that keep you now with the amount of auctions, the amount of cities that MECUM goes to? How much is that, consume your schedule from year to year?
Quite a bit. It doesn't take, I'm going to say, let's see, we have between 11 and 14 auctions per year. Each of those auctions will be on air between 2 and usually 5 days. The average would be 2 or 3 days
Right.
on air. And you got a day there and a day back. So if you count an average of 5 days per show and there's, 12 shows, then bang, you got 60 days that you're on the road per year for that. And I am under contract for that. And what that prevents me from doing is what I actually spend a lot more time doing on a full-time basis is auto racing and television production. But
Yeah.
because a contract is necessary, and you can't blame the network for that. They want the same people on every show. And it's
Sure.
fun to do, and I love doing it. It's a great company to work for. They're great people. It's the best auction anywhere in the world. The
No
only place
question.
you can go and see thousands of these just incredible, majestic cars, all in the same place in the same weekend. And
Absolutely.
so really the smart thing to do, and what the network needed me to do, was to commit to the year. So that's kind of like my baseline for the year.
Mhm.
And I have actually turned down more money to drive a race car and turned it down because I'm under contract to do MECUM, and I don't regret it a bit.
No, I got
It's just a great baseline to everything that I do. And so everything, what you end up at the beginning of the year is you put in your building blocks on your calendar of all the wonderful auctions I get to do with MECUM. And then I start slotting all of my full-time work in between those auctions. And it works out well. It's if it sounds like a mess, it's not. It's really not. It actually works really well. And here we are again, going into our 16th season. Can you believe it?
wow. It doesn't sound like a mess, but it sounds like it could be tricky. It sounds like it could definitely be
Yeah,
difficult.
it can be. It can be.
Yeah. Well, I've got to ask, I got to ask you this, Stephen. Maybe this is something I should have asked off air, but I'm going to ask on air. We'll keep this real. Um, Bill Stevens is one of the co-hosts of the MECUM auctions as well. Of course, with Scott Hoke and John Kramer, JK, the professor. Um, but your relationship, your on-air relationship with Bill Stevens, and let me just say, Bill is, I love Bill. He's a drag racing encyclopedia, and I'm a big time drag racing fan. So is my wife, Patricia. But anyway, my point being, you guys seem to have this sarcastic, sometimes a little antagonistic on-air relationship. And I'm just wondering how organic are you guys friends, the four of you, but specifically you and Steven, are you guys buddies?
Yeah, we are buddies.
Good.
First of all, the four of us have been actually very good friends for 16 years now, and that's good because you have to work on such a close basis, and everybody sees that relationship, so it's good. I'm very good friends with Chris Jacobs and Katie as well,
Oh yeah.
and specifically with Bill. Bill and I are actually great friends. And everything that you hear on air can happen. All of the teasing and all the jabs and all the insults going back and forth, it can happen because we're great friends.
That
It
makes
couldn't
sense.
happen otherwise.
Right.
It would be too serious. And the funny thing is, Jerry, when see, Bill didn't join the show until like halfway through the first season,
Okay.
and so he came in a little bit late, and he was the fourth man in. And he came out and he starts giving me these jabs and insults on air. And at first, I was like, I don't know how to take this guy. What's he trying to do? I mean, I didn't do anything to him, and he's kind of and it took me a long time to get his really sarcastic and acidic type of humor, which is hysterical once you realize where he's coming from.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, it is not personal in any way because I get this question all the time. Believe it or not, I actually get this
Good. So
question
it's
all the
it's
time.
not just me.
It's not just you. And Bill and I are great friends. It is
Good.
all in great humor. And after last Friday's show, where were we? Not Kissimmee, Las Vegas. No, at
Mm.
Kissimmee. After the show at Kissimmee, me and Bill and the guys go out to eat. So we're great friends. And I'll tell you something about Bill. Bill is the spice in the soup. His bizarre humor and his off-the-wall, unpredictable commentary is, I really believe that it is the perfect complement to the somewhat straight delivery that you get from me and Scott and John Craman.
Oh, no
And
question.
I don't think the show would ever be the same without Bill Stevens.
I absolutely agree with you. And, look, I'm not saying this because you're a guest on Tosot Time. I believe the MECUM coverage is by far the best of all the auto auctions that are on TV. And you know that there's many, many of them now. Um,
Yeah,
and
well,
I
I'll tell you
was,
something about that, Jerry.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say when Chris Jacobs came into the mix, I have to admit, I was a little concerned because I was worried, addition by subtraction. Someone is going to exit to have Chris come in. And I was so pleased that that was not the case because I think Chris is great, but I'm more happy that no one had to exit in order to make room for him.
Yeah, and the company has been very, very good about that, and they've always been very insistent that their television presence was built around this cast, and they don't want to change it. And I'll tell you, you talk about the coverage that we have. I mean, there's all kinds of people that you don't see behind the scenes. You've got Sif and Jen in the truck with Tom and names that if I told you, you wouldn't know. The
Right.
camera guys, Jay and Jake and Eric down on the floor. These are the best people in the business. I know what else they do because I know them all. These people are out working Major League Baseball, working Indianapolis Colts games, working NBA games. This is the highest level of network sports broadcasting, and those are the people that are part of this broadcast.
Stephen, I want to dive into a little bit deeper your race car driving. Please share. I spoke about the many different series that you drive in the introduction, but please give us a little bit more detail about the scope of all the different series that you've been involved in, what you're racing in right now. And again, you spoke to it a little bit. How does that all juggle? How do you keep all those balls in the air along with everything else in your life?
Well, yeah, I've got I'm on a book contract right now. And maybe I shouldn't say I'm under a non-disclosure agreement, so I can't even tell you what it's on, but I've got a book contract on February 28th, and that's got to be done. And then you've got, like I mentioned earlier, you plug in all of your MECUM dates and other network dates as well. We've got some events for Dodge coming up and a number of other things that are television oriented, plus any television production. We had, what was it last year? 12 or 14 days of television production. And we got another contract coming up in May, I think, in Kansas City. So you plug all those in because they can't be moved.
Yeah.
Then you work with your sponsors and say, here are my driving options. Because Sopwith Motorsports and myself, I haven't owned a race car in a long time. It wasn't practical for me, I mean, it's the maintenance, and I'm not a mechanic. I mean, I can do it, but I don't enjoy it, and I'm not particularly skilled as a mechanic.
Right.
I'm far more skilled behind the wheel. A car runs better when the only thing I touch is the steering wheel. And so I try to focus on what I do best. And so I'll go to my sponsors and I'll say, I can run the former ARCA Truck Series, is now known as the CRS Super Truck Series. Mm-hmm. Or we can go racing in a number of different endurance racing series, which is probably my specialty. That may be sort of my forte more than anything else. We can do traditional sports car racing. We can go Trans Am racing, or we can run stock cars on ovals, which is what I grew up doing. And I'll give a bunch of dates out to my sponsors and say, guys, we're going to be all over the country, and we can pick and choose dates so long as they don't directly collide with a signed contract. And then we just start filling in slots. And then I'll usually get to where almost all the slots are full. And then I talk to my wife and I say, okay, there's a couple of races I would just like to run, whether I get paid for or not. I mean, you know, at a bit like, you know, Road America. For one reason or another, Road America has escaped me in my entire career. I want to go there. You know, everybody needs, it's a historic racetrack. And so I'll slot a couple of places that I just really enjoy being and want to be at, or races where I think we have a particularly good chance at winning at the end of the year. And honestly, since probably 2018, racing has really been full time. I mean, my schedule has been completely full, and I finally got to the point in my career after begging for rides and trying to drum up money, and you spend your whole life, you know, trying to get any kind of recognition to think, well, do you even know my name? Will you even call me? I'm finally to the point in my career now where I get people saying, hey, will you come drive our car?
Nice.
And and so it took so many years to get here that it's really hard to turn it down and walk away from rides. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So at some point, you've just got to cut things off. And usually in late October, I'm exhausted. I'm just done. And I need a couple of months off. And so, you know, I've run some November, December races, but that's kind of how it balances. And maybe that's TMI, but that's really what I do on a yearly basis.
Cool. And the different series that you run, Stephen, if you would, what are you currently driving? First, before you answer that, I don't want to forget this. You mentioned the truck series, and something I've been dying to ask you. My experience with truck, our driver, my previous employer, we sponsored an ARCA team for about 3 seasons, and the young driver, who was a wonderful young man, moved up to the trucks. And he did not have a lot of success with the trucks. And every time I've talked to anybody who's ever driven in the truck series, they say it's a completely different experience. There's no aero, right? There's no aerodynamics whatsoever. In fact, it's like driving a loaf of bread, you know. Right? But
it's worse than no aero. The aero actually works against you. You have this enormous amount of lift on the back of the truck.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask you. Is that true? Everything I've heard, that they're just very, very difficult to drive.
They are difficult to drive, and all, you know, I was talking with Eddie Cheever at the Indianapolis 500.
Oh, wow,
This has got to be 20 years ago now. And he was in a car that was not going to be competitive that year. They weren't going to win the pole, and they may not win the race, and he knew it. And so we were talking down in the garage, and I said, man, is this like depressing? You know, you're going out and you're practicing day after day, and you know that this team just doesn't have the speed. And he said, no, you misunderstand. And so my ears went up, and I thought, you know, when Eddie Cheever speaks, I'm going to listen. And he said, when you don't have the speed, you concentrate on 2 things. Number 1, make the car as reliable as sunrise. And number 2, driver comfort. And I always tried to keep that in mind, and boy, does it make an enormous difference. And how that translates into answering your question is, trucks are miserable to drive. They are terrible, man. There is no place to sit in them. And you sit like in a bolt upright position.
Yeah.
It's almost like sitting in a sprint car where you just are upright and your feet are down in front of you. And the cockpit is different. The floorboard is completely different. The cage is completely different. And not only do you not have good aerodynamics at all because of the bed and the aerodynamic drop off behind the cab, you get enormous lift on the back of the truck the whole time you're driving it. But in addition to that, it's hard to make your driver comfortable. And if you don't have a physically comfortable driver, he's never going to get the maximum that car offers. So that is the issue with trucks. I love them. And it was the ARCA truck series that I was in. I wasn't in the cars. I was in the ARCA truck series.
Gotcha.
And boy, they just did a great job running that series. It's very, very professional. And I've been in a bunch of different trucks now. And I promise you, Jerry, I've not been in one truck that I actually got into and put my belts on and strapped in and thought, ah, this is great. Not one. So they're a different animal, no doubt.
You know, I look at the example of Haley Deegan, who's the young lady with a lot of promise, but she's been in a truck the last couple of seasons. She's going to be in a truck again this season, but she had a couple of Xfinity runs last year where she really, really shined. And
Yeah.
I saw her on one of the, it wasn't the Dale Jr. podcast, but one of his Dirty Mo Media podcasts. But nonetheless, she actually was very open about how difficult it is to drive the truck. They really need to get her in an Xfinity car.
Yeah. I mean, she's talented, and more important than talent is the fact that she has a great deal of backing. And it's
No
just,
doubt.
and boy, I'll tell you something. In 2013 through 2015, my great flirt with, the highest levels of motorsports came during that time period. And I had a couple of companies behind me, and I had a few dollars to go spend to race. And I went to the Indy Lights series, and
Oh yeah.
Just with just a few races in Indy Lights, you keep your nose clean, you do the job well, you put up a couple of decent finishes, and you can definitely get into the big cars and go racing at the Indianapolis 500, which is exactly what I wanted to do. And so whenever I came in, just to show you how important backing is, I called up IndyCar. They were super helpful, super kind, and they put me in touch with a bunch of the Indy Lights teams. And I called them up, and the first question out of their mouths was, "How much money do you have?"
Yeah.
Notice what they didn't ask. Have you driven anything?
Right.
Can you drive anything?
Yeah.
Do you think you can do this? What is your background? Those questions came later. They did ask them, but the very first question out of their mouths was, how much money do you have? And that really determines far more than talent in this sport. And it's just the way it is. It's just the way it is.
It is the way it is, which is unfortunate. Every once in a while, like this new fella, well, he's not new anymore, but Ross Chastain, he came up the hard way. You know, he comes from farmers in they call him the watermelon farmer, because literally that's what he was, and that's what his family does for a living. But there are exceptions from time to time, but you're absolutely right. Unfortunately, it's the sponsorships you have, it's the money that you can bring to the team, and so many of them is a pay to drive situation. I know that in the NHRA, you know, guys like Jim Campbell who drive for Big Jim Dunn, that's a pay to drive situation.
That's the standard for the sport. Now, and if viewers are out there and they're thinking, well, wait a second, actually the driver, if you're a pro, you're supposed to be hired, and Roger Penske is going to write you a really big check and say, I am so honored to have you in my presence. Please drive my car. Listen, that mode of business is outdated by 40 years.
Yeah.
You are way behind the times. Almost everyone brings money to the ride, or you don't get the ride. Almost everyone.
Yeah, you know what? Now that you mention it, Stephen, I think the two businesses, the two industries, if you will, that have changed the most over the years is the music business and the racing business, right?
I can't argue that. Yeah.
By
But
far,
I mean,
the business models have completely done a
yes.
flip in both
And
of
it
those
is a
industries.
business model. You bring, if the owner has a certain amount of business, I mean, somebody's got to pay the check. Somebody's got to write the check at the end of the day.
Right.
And so if the owner says, I have this many expenses and I've got 5 drivers out here that are all really good. Listen, it is not hard to find a good race car driver. There's a lot of them.
There are.
I mean, truly talented people. There's a lot of them. There's no shortage. And so if you got 5 guys out there and the owner says, well, this guy has, $100,000 in sponsorship, and he's willing to give 50 of it to me to help cover my bills, and he can keep the other 50 and try to make a living and, go through some other series and that's the way that's it. That is the business model. And anybody that tells you otherwise either doesn't know what they're talking about or they're telling you lies.
Right. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So, Stephen, again, what series are you in right now? And how far, I know you go coast to coast. How far north do you race from time to time?
Let's see. I race as far north as Brainerd up in Minnesota,
For
which
sure, yeah.
is, I mean, that's way up there.
Yeah.
That's not far from the Canadian border, actually.
Yeah.
We'll be doing, I've got an option to run Watkins Glen this year. I've not yet clamped that down as being firm. I don't know if I want to take the ride or not. So we get a lot of northern stuff, but a lot of them I'll turn down too, because I don't care where the race is geographically if I can make money on it.
Gotcha.
If the owner needs $10 for the seat and I realize I can raise 20, well, then there's a $10 profit, and you go, that's how the business is. So
Absolutely.
I run in the World Racing League, which is one of my favorite endurance racing series. It is really well run, and I've scored several wins at their top level, and so that kind of makes you like it. People ask you what's your favorite track. It's usually the one I won that last is usually the answer. But the World Racing League is fantastic. You can take in my mind, and I hope this doesn't come across wrong, but a step down from that in expense would be the Champ Car Series. Would also really enjoy. A lot of fun. I think World Racing League is clearly a notch above that in horsepower, equipment, professionalism in some ways. But Champ Car fills a really big hole, and I like them a lot. I really do. And I don't want to say anything disparaging about them. I'm just trying to tell you where I run. Then the Grand National Super Series is a short track series. Yeah, I mean, NASCAR left short tracks, right? How many years ago was that? NASCAR left short tracks. And so short track fans are out there thinking, we love late models, but can we not see the big 600, 700, 800 horsepower, 3,000 pound monsters that NASCAR brings? Where are those? Well, that now is the Grand National Super Series. And Super Cup Stock Car Series, I've got some good finish in that series as well. And again, they are the big horsepower, big cars that go to short tracks and put on the show that NASCAR left behind. Then the CRS Super Truck Series run by Billy Straley, super nice guy. I like that series a lot. And the team that I drive for is just out of this world fantastic. Dan and Brandon and the guys at Huff Motorsports are just wonderful people to work with. I haven't won in that series yet, but I keep going back because I like them.
Yeah.
So those are the places that I run.
That's cool. So cool. Yeah, it certainly sounds like you got a lot of ground, literally a lot of ground covered there.
Yeah.
Stephen, look, after seeing you just last week at the motorcycle auction in Las Vegas, I always say the internet is a wonderful thing and an evil thing all at the same time. And something came up, the internet trying to be intuitive and anticipate what I may like to read about, actually came up with an article on Car Guys Chronicles. And it was an article written by you, something I never knew about you, that happened back in February. Oh, actually almost 7 years to the date, which is kind of weird. But you were at the Circuit of America in Austin, Texas, and there was a fire. You were involved in a serious car fire, and I'm going to let you take it from there, please.
Yeah. Long story short, there was a mechanical issue with the Porsche 944S that I was driving that day. And we had, I think we had won 3 races in a row. And more due to my teams than me. I mean, it's all about the equipment in auto racing. And I just came off just a fantastic year in 2015. Started out 2016, went and got hooked up with a Porsche team out of Kansas City. Went down to Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas, and we started 19th that day. And I had never been in this car in my life. Hadn't met anybody on these, like, super nice guys. I liked them, talked to them on the phone. We worked out the deal and went down to the race and started 19th. And after just a couple of laps, very, very, very early in an 8-hour endurance race, I smelled fuel, and I thought, something here ain't right. But remember, if you pull the car in, your race is over. You can still finish the race, but you're out of contention. And we were there to win.
Right.
And not only that, but you've got 3 other drivers on the team. And if you make a mistake and pull that car in, everyone is let down. Everyone left their jobs. Everyone flew to Texas, you know, and everybody realizes, okay, I mean, we could still run the laps, but our day's over. So you don't want to pull the car in. You don't want to pull the car in, and you sure don't want to pull it off somewhere off in the rest of the track.
Right.
And so I smell fuel, and this is one of the longest road courses in America. It's something like close to 4 miles long. It takes forever to get around this place. And we had moved from, I am told, I mean, I don't have any tracking this. All I know is what people tell me. But we moved from 19th up to 11th. We're doing early, and I wasn't even driving the car yet. I wasn't even leaning on the throttle yet because the track was really full and the traffic was heavy. And we're moving up and knocking on the top 10 and looking for a 4th straight win. And then when I smell the fuel, I think, could it be the guy in front of me and maybe the overflow is spitting out some fuel? Because, you know, you fill the cars for an endurance race, you fill the fuel neck up. I mean, every drop you can get in, you do. Hey, he shouldn't be burning fuel off, shouldn't still be throwing it out after 2 or 3 laps, I wouldn't think. And so I thought, I'm worried, but I'm going to pass this guy. Then if I still smell fuel, I know we're in trouble. Well, I got past him. But I got past him at the far end of the track right as we were passing the pit entrance. And so now I think, okay, I'm in clean air. What do I smell? Okay, I smell fuel, and it's worse, not better. But now you've got to go all the way around one of the longest road courses in the world to get back to the pits. And I just didn't want to end the team's day. And I thought, I need to stay out here and get back to pit row. And so almost made it, got all the way down the back stretch. At the very end of the back stretch, the car burst into flame. But by this point in time, it's been spitting so much fuel that the fuel vaporized under the hood and it soaked the right side of my suit. And of course, you've got several layers on. I had no way of knowing that. I just knew what I smelled. And so everything goes up in flames, me included. So I am literally, the right half of my body is literally burning. And there's no way the safety workers are going to get there in time. It's not their fault. I mean, it's just it was an out of control situation. And so while I was burning, you just kind of got to say, hey, you know, if you have to work through the pain. Or I mean, what's the alternative? It's not being heroic. It's just you die if you don't. So really, there's nothing heroic about it. You're just trying to save your own butt. And so while I sat there and burned, the contrast was so bad and my visibility was so limited by flames everywhere that I actually had to lift the visor on my helmet and just let my face burn. But I could see now much better. And eventually got out of the car and flopped and rolled because I was still burning on the asphalt, thinking, Lord, please don't let anybody hit me. Because you can't, I couldn't see to pull the car over. I mean, all you can see is orange everywhere. Your whole world's orange. Even my helmet was burning. And in fact, the helmet's sitting on the floor of my trophy case behind me. I still have it. And it's a burned up mess. So I woke up 2 days later in the hospital in intensive care at a special burn unit in San Antonio, Texas. And was a guest there for the next 10 or 11 days. And the rest of it's history. So, but I mean, you can still see, if you look carefully, you can see the outline of my helmet on my face. And television makeup covers it up. But when I lifted it, I had to see, or I was going to die. I had to see. And I could actually see a little bit better once I lifted, because I had a very dark visor on. And so, I mean, it messed up, this side of my face here and under my eye. And again, TV makeup covers it up. It's just not too bad. Scarring all the way up here around the neck, on my legs and my hands and stuff like that. But they took good care of me at the hospital. And I am fortunate and thankful to be here. And my big regret is that I couldn't save the car. Because I'll tell you, I'll be the first one to tell you, I didn't hit the fuel switch. The last thing on my mind was hitting the fire extinguisher switch to put the fuel out. I brought the car to a stop as fast as I could, because it wasn't just a car fire. I was burning on fire inside the cockpit as well as the car. And so I thought, and the car just burned to a crisp, and the team lost everything. And I've always felt bad about that. But
well, call it what you wish.
You gotta prioritize things.
Absolutely, but and again, call it what you wish. But that sounds heroic to me. You describe it any way you wish, but that sounds off. And clearly a reminder, obviously to yourself who lived through such a thing, but to all of us who are enthusiasts of racing, it could be a dangerous business. It's not all fun and games.
Yeah, at any level, and I mostly race the mid levels of the sport. I mean, as we talked a few minutes ago, I kind of missed my opportunity at Indy cars, and so I race at the mid levels of the sport, and you can get hurt there too.
Oh,
they had another big fire in a Corvette about a year or so ago, and another guy I know that got burned up pretty good. So you got to be careful. If at this point in my career, if they make a safety thingamabob, I wear it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yes, I wear the triple layer suit. I wear the Nomex underwear under the triple layer suit. I mean, everything. I wear it.
Yeah. And thankfully, there have been so many advances in safety equipment. Yeah. Well, again, so glad that you came out of that well and were able to continue both of your careers. Stephen, I want to talk about race sponsorship. I know you in the past have had a relationship with Gold Eagle Company. Most of us gearheads know Gold Eagle through their product Stable. I use Stable there you go. I use Stable in all of our vehicles, and thus the name. It keeps the gasoline stable during the off season. Right now, all of my cars are what I call in hibernation, and all of them had some Stable go through the system before I put them into hibernation. But my question is this: what are the benefits for companies that want to expand their demographic and core audience to include the motorsports viewing audience? What does it bring to a company to be a sponsor, if you will?
Nothing if you do it wrong. And this is like the best question you could possibly ask.
Oh, good.
I have had companies that sponsored me, and they send you a check, and then they get to the end of the year and they look at their books and say, we didn't make any more money. What did we do that for?
Right.
Because all you did was send a check.
Yeah.
This needs to be an entire process that takes an investment of time and effort. Now, I have other companies that have sponsored me, and years later, they're still using the photo content that we came up with, the video content that we came up with, still advertising the fact that we won this race and this championship in 2004 and 2012. They're still using that same stuff, and they put it on their social media. They still talk about it. They put it up and say, this is the history of our company. We have a legacy in motorsports, and it is absolutely proven that people who love motorsports will go way out of their way to do business with companies that support motorsports. Whether that company makes an automotive product or not makes absolutely no difference. Racing fans are uber loyal, and they will bend over backwards, but they have to know. Now, if I go out and I run, let's see, we won that one. We won Midvale in the Super Cup race in 2017. You go out, you win that race, it goes on television, and it was televised. Then the television airing gets repeated 2 or 3 times, and then what happens? Nothing. It's gone.
Right.
Unless the company involved saw the chance ahead of time to put out a press release and an announcement, put it on all their social media, put it on their website, spread the word as best they can. Okay, we have signed a contract with this driver and we're going racing. Okay, there's a contact with the people who will use your product. Then you come out and you tell your racing driver that we have a message, who we make spark plugs. Our message is that we burn cleaner than anybody else. Okay, that's your message. Driver, we want you to do this in all of your interviews, because he's going to be conducting some big, some small, some websites, all this kind of stuff. But if he has no message, all he can do is try to remember a name, and that's it. Right. And there are companies out there, Jerry, that don't do this, and they write a check, they put a name on the side of the car, and then they sit back and like, okay, what happened? Well, probably nothing.
Right.
Unless you use the content across all of your available platforms, and then it will reward you. And I think Stable is the perfect example.
Yeah.
In 2019 and 2020, they sent me to a couple of Grid Life events. And especially, I think in 2019, 2020, one of those days we ran really well. Went out and finished in the top 12 or 15 out of like 70 cars at Gingerman. Then we finished in the top 3, made it on the podium for points at a huge event that they hold out at Pikes Peak International Raceway. And that year, they set all-time sales records across the board on all their Stable products. Yeah. Now, is that because of Stephen? No, probably not. It's probably because of Bob Galeska is a really good friend of mine. He's the brand manager for Stable, and the guy's just brilliant in everything he does. It's them, but in some respects, we got to be a part of that. And if Stable wasn't, if they didn't have a Bob Galeska and his marketing brain to take this content and to get it out there and to use it, then it wouldn't have been able to contribute. So the bottom line can and will be there if it is used properly. You got to remember that sponsorship is like a hammer. Okay, I bought a hammer. Well, are you building anything?
Right.
No, but I got a hammer. Right. Okay, then it's doing you no good whatsoever. If you take it and you start hammering something together with it, now you have a tool that will work and it will function. And I think, Bob and Elizabeth and Bobby and all the people over at Stable are living proof of that.
It's so interesting, Stephen. So much of what you just said, I lived with my previous employer with that ARCA team.
Really?
Yeah, with the ARCA team. Well, first of all, they made the commitment to the team before I got there. And by the time I got there, it was a 3-year commitment, and we were probably well into the second season. And exactly what you said, prior to me getting there, and I'm not taking any credit for this, it's just the reality of it, they wrote a check. They wrote a check to this team. They didn't participate. They didn't go to the track. And when I got there, I said, come on, this is a fantastic, you've paid for this. It's an enormous investment. We got to get some return on it. And I am happy to say by the time I left, it was showing a return on investment, but you're absolutely right. It's a two-way street. It's not just a matter of writing the check. To some degree, writing the check is the easy part. You have to work as a sponsor as hard as the team has to work to win, right?
Exactly.
And, yeah. So interesting that you mentioned that.
Yeah, if the sponsoring company does nothing but write a check and then sit back and cross their arms and expects miracles to happen, the odds of them succeeding are slim. If the company writes a check and then commits themselves to this advertising campaign, not necessarily spending more money, but commits themselves to using and building around it, the chances of failure are very, very slim. 9 times out of 10, you're going to see a really solid ROI.
No question about it. Like I say, I can attest to that for sure. I lived it. And one thing it made me uber aware of is just how expensive racing is. Yeah, for sure, right? And not every company can afford to sponsor a team for an entire season. So Stephen, my question to you is this: with the series that you're involved in, are there opportunities for like a single race sponsorship where we're not doing an entire season, but possibly just a single event where we would have an opportunity to sponsor? Is that possible?
Yeah, it's absolutely possible. In fact, in my case, that's preferable because I'm in some cases I'm at a disadvantage, and in some cases I'm at an advantage at what I can offer a sponsor. What I cannot offer a sponsor is every race commitment all the way through the year. That's almost impossible for me to do,
right?
Because of my television commitments.
Sure.
But and somebody else, there's a lot of other really good drivers out there who can offer that they're going to run for points, and they're going to run the exact same car in the exact same series, sometimes at the exact same track all year long. And there are some positives to that. I can't offer those, but I like to think that there are some other advantages I can offer. Number one, absolutely yes, I can do one-off races, because most of my season is one-off races. That's
right.
kind of what I do. I'll
Right.
drive for the same team 2, 3, 4 times in a year, sometimes once in a year, and that's pretty much it. And then I have to bounce to a different series because I've got another sponsor who's interested, or another ride came up in road racing, and I've been running ovals or something like that. And the second thing that I bring, I think, is a lot more exposure, because I'm nobody's Brad Pitt, but 32 million people a year watch MECUM auctions.
No
And
question.
an enormous number. I don't know how many people per year will watch me on live streaming. They'll when races that are streamed, they'll see articles that are written about my racing throughout the year. So I feel like it kind of counterbalances it. And what it does is it gives a potential sponsor an opportunity to, instead of spending in the high 6 figures or millions, they can come down to a much more manageable number and cherry pick 1 or 2 or 4 or 5 events, or sometimes just one event, and know that there will be at least some small level of notoriety that's attached to that ride if they use it.
Right. Yeah, no question. And Stephen, I've often looked at race sponsorship in the point of view as a customer appreciation event. And what I mean by that is our customers at Tosot, we like to do special events for them. Last year, we went to the F1 race in Montreal. We're based in Quebec, so it made perfect sense. But we like to do, and all companies, right? Most companies want to do some sort of customer appreciation event. And I think race sponsorship is beautiful for that. And I know you can speak to this, because it not only gives the customer an opportunity to be at the track, which unto itself is fantastic, but it gives them rock star access. Let's be honest. They're going to meet Stephen Cox. They're going to be able to get up close to the car. They're going to be in the pits if they wish. It's just an experience that you can't get anywhere else.
No, and you can't buy a ticket and go get that experience either,
Right.
but you can be immersed inside the event. And from a standpoint of return on investment and customer entertainment, what this does is it gets you away from the showroom. And most importantly, it gets your customer out of their place of business.
Yeah, no question.
And once they're out of there, they are mentally free. Everything comes down a notch. They know they're there to have fun. And now you can take your customer relationship to the next level and be their friend. And once you're friends with somebody, you'll do business with them forever, because they're your friend. And that is what you have. And you cannot accomplish that, no matter how good a salesperson is. You cannot break out of that mindset as long as they've got headsets on, or they're sitting talking to a phone, and they're in their office, or they're on a job site. That's where their mind is, and it has to be of necessity. You've got to get them away from that and give them something fun to do. And at that point, you don't have to sell anything. Now you can just legitimately just be their friend and just have fun together for the day. And that cements long-term relationships, which results in long-term sales.
So well said. I think the racetrack is the new golf course. What do you think of that?
Can I use that?
I gotta
remember that.
I want you to use that.
That's really good.
I want you to use that. And just one more thing before I move on to the next question. We did little die-cast models of the ARCA car. And to this day, now that's years ago, I could walk into offices of my former customers with that product, and that car's still there, baby. It's amazing. They look at that car every time they turn their computer on in the morning. Like you said, it lasts. If you do it correctly, it lasts a long, long time.
Well, put it this way. Tell me what the Gulf colors are. What are they?
The Gulf oil colors? Blue, orange, and white.
How would you possibly know that?
Well,
it's been 60 years, Jerry. How could you possibly know that?
right.
And we all know that advertising doesn't really work. How could you possibly instantly, right off the top of your head, name their exact colors for Gulf Oil after 60 years?
Yeah.
Well, the honest truth of the matter is, decades and decades and decades later, that's still advertising for that company.
Yeah.
You know who was on the very first car, the Marmon Wasp, in the first Indy 500, who provided tires for them?
Oh, no, I don't.
Firestone. Firestone. And if you look at their advertising still today, it's been over 110 years. And that day is still advertising for Firestone.
Yeah.
You cannot beat this. And that's
cool.
why I was mentioning a few ago, I've got sponsors out there. They dig up content from years past and they bring it back out. And they say, here's what we accomplished in the sport that you love. That stuff makes a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. I didn't realize that about Firestone. You know, as you know very, very well, I'm a Maserati owner. And
that's right. Yeah.
Right. I believe it's the 1939 and the 1940 Wilbur Shaw in the only Maserati ever to enter. And doesn't he win twice in the Boyle Special, 39, all pre-war, 39 and 40. Yeah. And Maserati to this day, right? I mean, how many years has passed? They bring up Wilbur Shaw in the Boyle Special as the Maserati powered vehicle to win 2 years in a row. Oh, it's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, look, Stephen, I think one thing I want to emphasize as well is not, you know, when we talk race sponsorship, you have a very unique opportunity to add some value with the Sopwith Motorsports, because you're not only a race team, but you're a TV production organization, agency as well. So please speak to that. What, besides what you're doing on the track for a sponsor, what I'll call Sopwith Productions, what can that do for a sponsor?
Well, we've actually involved that on a number of occasions. We have had, well, let me think, 1, 2, 3 clients that I know of. 4. I'm going to say, if I could sit down and think it all through, we've had at least 4 to 6 clients who decided they okay, we're sponsoring Stephen, we're sponsoring the car. What would it take to make a TV show out of this? And we actually made a television series for these clients.
Wow.
And some of them involved actually televising the races that we were in that would not have been otherwise televised.
Right.
And so what we can do is anything necessary to produce video content that is of interest to a company's customer base. And we can bring anything to the table. I mean, when we were producing Desert Racing out west, we had helicopters on site with aerial cameras. You know, we use drones. We have some of the best camera people in the business that we keep on staff that are available as contractors to come in, because I work in the business, so I know them all.
Sure.
And yeah, we have produced a lot of content like that specifically at the client's request. But, you know, it's interesting that you mentioned that, though, because that's all part of what we were talking about earlier. If you go into this and you say, okay, we're going to be in this car at this race with Stephen driving, and what are we going to do with this? Well, one of the first and obvious things that comes up is make a plan as to what you're going to do, because we can bring as part of that full television and video production services, whether it's live streaming, whether it's you know, post-produced packages that can be put out to advertise that we were part of this event. A lot of times I'll do live updates on my phone from events while they're happening that sponsors can then bounce on their websites, and it's out there within a matter of seconds to everybody. So the important thing is to have a plan, because we can execute anything we want. We have full production service and full production capacity, full post-production editing capacity, and I know most of the networks in the country. So we can do anything. The question is, will the sponsoring company come up and say, hey, let's sit down, let's get pencil and paper, and let's make a smart plan here, and utilize everything as best we can.
No question. And Stephen, I'm going to help you with a little promotion here. I'm going to encourage all of our listeners and watchers of this program to go to sopwithmotorsports.com, SOPWITH, sopwithmotorsports.com, and see for yourself all of the different things that Stephen and his TV production and the race team can do. It's just really, it's a wonderful website, first of all, Stephen, and it really does accentuate everything beyond just what you could do on the track. It's really an exciting
Well, thanks
website.
for the plug. Hey, definitely go. Thanks for the plug.
Please. Absolutely. Hey, look, Stephen, we've been talking for an hour, believe it or not. Time flies when you're having fun. So one last question, if you will. I know you're a Mustang guy. So other than a Mustang, just put Mustangs out of your mind, if you can, just for a moment. What car have you driven that impressed you more than any other? And what car haven't you driven that you want to? Go.
Okay. Incredibly impressive cars include the Porsche 911, but you kind of expected that. It's a Porsche.
Yes.
The Corvette C5 and C6, but you expected that. It's a Corvette. Your Maserati drives awesome, and thank you again for giving me a few minutes of seat time. And oh, that was such a fun car. And the Ferrari V8 engine in that thing is just off the charts amazing. That was a fun car to drive.
Thank you.
You expected it. I'll give you one car that's going to surprise you.
Yeah.
Go back to the late 1980s, and Toyota was making the first generation MR2, and this was in the wedge car time period. Remember the Fiero, the Fiat X19, the little tiny wedge cars were a thing back in the 1980s. And Toyota comes along and they make the first generation Toyota MR2 with, I think, a 1.8 liter engine, 119 horsepower. And
Stephen, it was mid-engine, was it not?
It was a mid-engine. It was not rear engine. You're exactly right. It was a true mid-engine car. And I bought one of those just on a lark, thinking, let's just see if it's any fun.
Yeah.
If you can get a 1987 or 88 with the full aero package on it, because the aerodynamics on that car and the rear wing, it works. It is dialed in and it works. You will have more fun than you can possibly imagine. That car, in the United States, they have exit ramps of varying degrees. And some of them are 50 miles an hour. Some of them are 25 is about the lowest. Right. I could take a 25 mile an hour exit ramp at 71 miles an hour before the wheels broke loose. And when the wheels broke loose,
this is being recorded.
We'll pretend it was under construction or something. Besides, the statute of limitations has been years ago.
You're right.
And when the wheels broke loose, the car went very neutral, and it was extremely predictable. And believe it or not, a dinky little 4-cylinder Toyota MR2 that you can buy for $10,000 is the most surprising, shocking amount of joy that you can possibly imagine. I kid you not. If you can still find one, you try it and tell me I'm wrong.
Well, you got me. I would have never guessed that that would have been your choice, but that's what
Nobody thinks it.
That's what I love about doing this program. I always learn something new, and I certainly learned something there. But what about a car you haven't driven that you would love to drive, that you just haven't had an opportunity yet?
I have not driven any Ferrari. Driven a ton of Porsches, a ton of BMWs. I have never driven a Ferrari with a Ferrari chassis. Your Maserati was the closest thing I ever drove to a Ferrari. That would be on my hit list. I would really enjoy that. And I have not driven a C8 Corvette, which I would enjoy driving, because there wouldn't be much mystery in that, because I've driven and raced a ton of mid-engine cars, but I just want to be able to say I did it,
Yeah, no question.
Everybody should be able to say I drove the new Corvette. Everybody should be able to say that.
Stephen, I thought Corvettes were out of my system at the height of my contracting business. Patricia and I's 2003, we went into a Chevy dealership and laid down cash for a Z06 in 2003. And that car meant so much to my son, so many different levels. But we had it for 10 years. We enjoyed it. We moved on, and I thought Corvettes were out of my system. But the new mid-engine Corvette, I could see us getting one.
I'm a Ford guy, and I'll give you the world's shortest Corvette story. Let me see if I can find it. I don't know if you can see a red #1 trophy over there in the corner or not. I'm not sure if it's visible in the picture or not, but was driving, and this is less of a commentary on my driving and more of a commentary on Matt Peterson and the guys at Braunschweig Racing. We went out to a World Racing League event at Gingerman Raceway in 2015 or 2016. Had never driven for the team before. They didn't know me from the Man on the Moon. They were like, man, I hope this guy's good and can't wreck the car. And that Corvette was so dialed in, and it was so comfortable to drive. And it was a C5 Corvette, and the 5 and the 6 were, pretty close kin. The 7 kind of departed a bit, but we went out, and I never sat in that car in my life. And when the race began on Saturday morning, I'd been fitted into the car, but I had never fired it up. I had no practice laps at all. It rained on Friday, and so I went out on Saturday, and Matt and his team had that car so dialed in that I was very fortunate to be able to set a new track record that still stands to this day for WRL Racing at Gingerman.
Wow.
In a bloody fast car that was a joy to drive, and we won the race going away. That is a commentary from a Ford guy on Corvettes. Okay, that's pretty high praise from a Ford guy.
Very.
It will take an average driver and make you remarkable.
Stephen, I could do this for hours upon hours, but just a couple of things before I let you go. You mentioned the 911. I've never driven a 911. I've never been in a 911, nevertheless driven one. Well, you know what? I take that back. I definitely did the Porsche experience in Shanghai, China, back in July 2018. Because I did not have a Chinese driver's license, I physically could not be the driver, but one of their professional drivers took me out, and it was.
But you got the experience. Still.
I got literally the Porsche experience. But my point being is there are people, and admittedly mostly Porsche owners, that believe the 911 is the greatest car ever made. Mm-hmm. Again, having never driven one, I don't know if I can agree or disagree, but certainly there a lot of support to that. Another thing I want to mention, I'm reading a book right now, Stephen. I'd be curious to know if you know the name before I even talk about him. Randy Lanier?
Yeah. He was an IndyCar driver from, I want to say, the late 1980s. Are we talking about the same Randy?
We are. Okay. I believe, I may have the year wrong, so don't hold me to this, but I believe he was the rookie of the year at Indy in 1985, where as a rookie, he came in 10th.
Yep. And that Randy's a guy who clawed his way to the top. I'm sorry I interrupted you, but he deserves a lot of credit.
Well, he did claw his way to the top. But again, something going back in our interview earlier about finances, you do know how he financed his climb.
No, I don't. I know some of his story, but I've never met him. I don't know the whole story. How did he do it?
Well, the name of the book is Survival of the Fastest by Randy Lanier. And it was through smuggling weed. Marijuana. Yeah. I mean, on the highest level, Stephen.
That's great.
But
and it's not even illegal most places now.
You're right, but it didn't, not without a cost. He spent 27 years in federal prison.
I didn't know it was that long.
27 years. Only in the last couple of years was he released. And yeah, what he spent 27 years for, you're absolutely right. In today's world, nothing, right?
Yeah. Well, my dad always told me that if something is illegal today, but legal tomorrow, that's an immoral law. And if it is legal on this side of a line, but if you take a step to your left and now it's illegal, that's an immoral law. So,
yeah.
And Dad was right.
You're right. What Randy does today is he's back to racing in Porsches. but he
Yeah.
also has an organization that helps to get pardons for those who were convicted of um, nonviolent drug situations that, again, by today's laws would have never happened anyway. So,
Oh, that's great.
but
That's
such an
great.
incredible book and such an incredible story. So I'll recommend that to you to read.
Thank you.
One
That's
last thing.
that's on my reading list now.
Oh,
That sounds cool.
you're really going to enjoy it for sure. Stephen, one last thing, and this is super exciting for certainly for me, and I believe for you as well. We're going to make an announcement right here, right now, and that is a partnership between Tosot and Sopwith Motorsports. You have just recently built a new headquarters for Sopwith Motorsports, beautiful brand new building. And we at Tosot will be providing the HVAC for that new building. And we are just so excited to be partnering with you on this building. We're going to, I should say, we together, Sopwith TV Productions, will be filming, documenting, if you will, the entire process. The install will be done by me, and as well as some of the other guys from our crew here at Tosot. So, Stephen, we are just so excited to have this partnership with you, and I'm looking forward to 2023 as we move into the months. Right now, we're just waiting for some specifications on the building so that we'll do a proper heat gain, heat loss, so that we correctly choose the right equipment, and then it's full speed ahead, baby.
Well, I trust no one more than Tosot. You guys are fantastic. You've done this for a long time. I really, really appreciate you guys engineering this and making this happen. So thank you. Thanks to everybody with the company. I'm really excited because, again, this is something that will allow me to, years from now, still be saying, here is what Tosot did for me. And here is what the company did for Sopwith Motorsports, and here is our building, and just every time that we have something shot inside that building. We just had road noise come by and shoot something just, I don't know, a month or so ago, and you know, we get, there's some traction out there with publicity and people wanting to come by and talk about MECUM and you know, YouTube channels and TV shows. I mean, it does happen occasionally, and
Absolutely.
it's just going to be a great platform for me to tell everybody how much I appreciate what Tosot has done and what they have done to forward heating and air conditioning in a technological sense. And I'll get to experience that firsthand, and I'm really grateful.
Oh, we're so excited, Stephen. You know, it brings to the forefront a market that we are so interested in with our product, and that is, quite frankly, the garage, the man cave, the she shed, whatever you want to call it. These areas.
Everybody's building them.
Everybody's building them, right?
Everybody,
Which is
yeah.
great. Yeah. And again, your application there at Sopwith Motorsports, your new headquarters, will just really bring that to the forefront and just be a wonderful example of what we can do in that type of application. So again, can't thank you enough for the partnership. Looking forward to spending a lot of time with you in 2023, getting this accomplished. And I will end it with this. We hope to have many more very fun and interesting announcements with Stephen Cox as we move forward throughout the year.
I look forward to it myself, my friend, and thank you so very much.
Stephen, I love you, my friend. Thank you so much for doing this. I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. See you later.
So great spending that time with Stephen Cox. Look, my pick of the month is going to be the book that Stephen and I spoke about in our interview toward the end there, and that is Survival of the Fastest by Randy Lanier, along with A.J. Baim. And A.J. Baim is a New York Times best-selling author. Randy Lanier was the 1986 Indianapolis 500 Rookie of the Year, came in 10th in his rookie year. He's an IMSA GT champion, and the book details his rise to the highest levels of auto racing and how he financed it. And I did mention that, I'm a bit of a spoiler in the interview, but I did mention that it was financed through an international smuggling ring set up by Randy and his buddies. to finance his racing activities. Hey, look, he paid the price, 27 years in the federal pen, but you've got to read this book. It's absolutely fascinating. You feel the tension, you feel the stress. I can't imagine what Randy was going through as he was actually living this. It's hard to believe that someone actually did live this. But just a wonderful read, extremely well written. Randy is a wonderful guy. Again, whatever you feel about what he did, and I have my own feelings on that, very strong feelings. But again, he paid a very severe price. He's come out the other end of it, and just a fantastic read. I recommend it. So, Survival of the Fastest, Randy Lanier. Check it out.